Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I've shown you part 1 of how the intensive care team is skillfully playing with your emotions if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to even dig deeper into the topic how the intensive care team is skillfully playing with your emotions if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. So it's part 2 today. After I have introduced you to a real-world example last week in how the intensive care team is skillfully playing with your emotions if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, and after I have shown you that you're on dangerous ground every time you feel indebted and or feel gratitude towards the intensive care team because you feel like you want to or even need to return a favor when they ask you to do so, this week I want to dig in even deeper into the psychology and the dynamics at play. Feeling gratitude or feeling that you and your family are indebted towards the intensive care team because the very life and the very health of your critically ill loved one are in the hands of the intensive care team makes you and your family very vulnerable, and it puts you into a precarious and dangerous position where you and your family are prone to make mistakes, make the wrong choice, give in to the demands from the intensive care team, who is the perceived authority and who has the perceived power. This makes it an extremely dangerous situation for you, for your family, and for your critically ill loved one, especially when you are in one of those difficult, challenging, heartbreaking, and once-in-a-lifetime situations where your loved one is very unstable and in a very critical condition, or is in a life-threatening situation, or is in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, or is having a severe or traumatic head or brain injury, or is threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order. Or your loved one might be in a situation where the intensive care team suggests a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as being quote-unquote in the best interest of your critically ill loved one. Or your loved one may even be approaching their end of life in intensive care. The fact of the matter is that if your critically ill loved one is in one of those difficult, challenging, heartbreaking, and once-in-a-lifetime situations, the wheels that are in motion in a volatile, dynamic, highly political, and intriguing environment that is driven by the intensive care team's hidden agenda, that if you and your family are not on high alert, and if you and your family don't understand the dynamics and the psychology at play, the intensive care team will push their agenda forward without you even knowing that it's happening. And I can assure you that after more than 15 years intensive care nursing experience in 3 different countries, and after I have worked with literally thousands of critically ill patients and their families, that I've been through and witnessed many situations where the intensive care team has been skillfully playing with the emotions of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, only to find that the pressure the intensive care team is putting onto families was driven by the financial interests of the intensive care team. For example, will they make money or will they lose money and not meet their budget targets when continuing to treat your critically ill loved one? The intensive care team's interests are also often driven by the competition for scarce, precious, and expensive intensive care beds with other critically ill patients waiting for admission to intensive care, or the medical research interests of the intensive care team. For example, if your critically ill loved one doesn't fall into a medical research category, is the intensive care team even interested in continuing treatment on your critically ill loved one? Remember, medical research is generating multi-million-dollar funding per year for intensive care units and is used as a leverage and positioning tool for intensive care units. Also, what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care, such as the politics, the power play, the dynamics, the competing interests, the intrigue, and the hidden agenda by the intensive care team. The fact of the matter is that if you don't have an awareness and an understanding of what's really happening in intensive care, the intensive care team will have an easy time to continue to play with your emotions skillfully. Once again, your job, your task at hand, if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, is to have peace of mind, control, power and influence. And I can assure you that if you feel gratitude and if you feel indebted towards the intensive care team because you feel like they're doing so much for your critically ill loved one, you are walking on dangerous ground. I'll give you another real-world example so that you really understand what I'm talking about. Your 21-year-old daughter has been in a severe car accident and she sustained severe and traumatic head and brain injuries. On top of that, she fractured her hip, her pelvis and some ribs. Your daughter has been very unstable and critical from the start, and especially her traumatic head and brain injuries caused the brain to swell and it caused high brain pressures. Your daughter therefore was placed on a ventilator and in an induced coma. It was difficult from the start to manage your daughter's brain pressures, and therefore the intensive care team painted a quote-unquote doom and gloom picture from the very beginning. After about 3 weeks in intensive care and after the hip and pelvis fractures had been fixed, your daughter still doesn't show any signs of life and still hasn't woken up and still hasn't shown any sign of life, even though she has technically come out of the induced coma. You and your family know that your daughter is in a critical and dangerous situation, and you are anxiously waiting to see whether your daughter will wake up or not. So far your daughter has been mainly unresponsive to external stimuli. However, you and your family are hopeful that she will come good and that she will wake up. The intensive care team is now asking to have a formal family meeting with you. You can also check out some related articles about family meetings in intensive care if you're looking in the written version of this blog below the video. During the family meeting, the intensive care consultant suggests that given that your daughter isn't waking up and given that the CT brain results of your daughter are rather bleak, that they would suggest a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as quote-unquote in the best interest of your critically ill daughter. The intensive care team knows that you and your family have shown gratitude and that you and your family have been thankful towards the intensive care team so far for what they've done for your daughter. The intensive care team also feels the pressure from the intensive care administrators to not spend too much money on your daughter's treatment, as they know that continuing treatment for patients with severe and traumatic brain injuries could cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. The intensive care team also knows from experience that most families of critically ill patients in intensive care, on a conscious or subconscious level, feel gratitude and feel indebted towards them, as so far they have tried to save your daughter's life. The intensive care team therefore knows that families of critically ill patients in intensive care often give in to their demands as the law of reciprocity kicks in. What most families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't know is that especially with severe and traumatic head or brain injuries, the recovery time can be extremely long, and the critically ill patients with severe head or traumatic brain injuries need time, lots of attention and tender, loving care. Many intensive care teams are not willing to put in the time, the energy and the financial and emotional resources that it takes to get patients with severe head or brain injuries onto the road of recovery. For intensive care teams who are dealing with many competing interests, with politics, dynamics, power play, and always have a hidden agenda that families of critically ill patients in intensive care have, generally speaking, no or limited awareness about, the easy way out of their dilemma is to shrewdly and adeptly, quote-unquote, sell you and your family on a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment as being, quote-unquote, in the best interest for your daughter. You can also check out the article, The 5 Questions You Need to Ask When the Intensive Care Team is Talking About Futility of Treatment, Withdrawal of Life Support, or about withdrawal of treatment. Look at this article by clicking on the link below this video. That's how the intensive care team is driving their agenda home. That's how intensive care teams manage their budget. That's how they protect their turf, so to speak. And they know how to and when to skillfully play with your emotions. That's how the intensive care team manages their beds if they know that they have other critically ill patients waiting for beds. That's what intensive care teams do when they're not prepared to guide you through one of the most difficult, most challenging and heartbreaking situations there can ever be in a family's life. That's often what intensive care teams do if they know that you consciously or unconsciously feel gratitude and indebted towards the intensive care team. The trouble is that if you are not aware of your emotions, and if you are not aware how the intensive care team might be skillfully playing with your emotions, you, your family, and your critically ill loved one might be paying the highest price there is ever to pay in situations like this. Your loved one may die because you've given in to the demands of the intensive care team, and you've given in to their perceived power and their perceived authority. Your loved one may die because you didn't have a strong positioning and you didn't pursue your agenda relentlessly. The intensive care team is pursuing their mainly hidden agenda relentlessly, and if you are not prepared, if you are not doing your own research, and if you are not prepared to fight for what you believe in, then it might be too late. Don't say that I haven't warned you. So, how can you quickly get peace of mind, control, power and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You get to that all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You will get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You will get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care, and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section, where we answer your questions, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.